And now, we're going to be having music throughout the afternoon, so settle in. And Georgia Kelly is going to carry us to the next transition on harp, which will be followed by David Hoffman, who will be speaking. So thank you. So, like so many things that I know about, one of the greatest things about Henry and the Dakin family is there's always lots of music and interesting people intertwined in their life. And our next speaker is no exception. And our afternoon is going to be like that, with lots of music and lots of diversity in speakers. And before I introduce them, just to let you know, think of this a little bit like a gamelan. If any of you have been to a traditional gamelan, of course, they go all night from sunset to sunrise. We're not going to do that. But if you need to get up and get a drink, please do. If you need to go get something, just if you remember from the way Henry always had the life at 3220, you could kind of come and go. You could sleep there in an apartment. You could get something to eat. You could have an event there. Or you could talk to the Soviet Union by telephone. So there was lots of options. So just whatever it takes for you to settle in and really be present is what is to do, is the right thing to do. And in that mind, the next speaker that you'll hear from is David Hoffman, the founder and CEO of Internews, an organization that Henry was on the board of for many, many years, and one that was that I know he was particularly proud of. And I just want to please welcome David Hoffman.
Henry Dakin was the original "if you build it, he will come" story. He built it, and we all came. Henry was the center of gravity for many, if not most, of the people in this room, and many, many others who are not able to be here today. When we hear the word 3220, we all know what it means. This is a remarkable village that Henry built on Sacramento Street, a place of where, you know, in the past, some artists and writers sometimes got together and created movements. Here, social entrepreneurs and innovators got together, possibly for the first time. It's really mostly an untold story, and an untold story about a very remarkable man who, at the height of the Cold War, when we were really, really close to launching missiles against ourselves that would have obliterated life on Earth, we realized that, as Bob Fuller back there would say, you know, the war was too dangerous to be left to the generals, and diplomacy was too dangerous to be left to diplomats and politicians. So we kind of took it on ourselves. And out of this came truly remarkable things that had a profound influence in breaking down the Cold War. You know, the San Francisco-Moscow teleport, the first internet connection between Russia and the United States, the early space bridges, the citizen exchange movements that came out of here, the capital-to-capital program that brought the leaders of the Soviet Union and the United States into dialogue in front of 200 million people, the first private Russian telecom and astronauts and cosmonauts, and on and on and on. We used to say there should be a statue in Moscow after the Cold War for Henry. I used to think about that a lot. I always pictured it as Prince Henry on a horse with a suit of shining armor. But of course, as we've heard and will continue to keep hearing, Henry just wouldn't take credit for anything. So, you know, we often think of the 1960s as being the most exciting decade. Frankly, I prefer in a certain way the 1980s, particularly the early 1980s, which I call the Dakin decade. You know, you remember that? Remember that sound that you used to hear when two dial-up modems would connect? That's kind of what we did between the Soviet Union and the United States. It really does take a village, and we had a village in which you were more often to hear Russian on Sacramento Street than English. You'd walk down the street and you'd see all kinds of people who were sharing their networks and their resources and their ideas and helping each other launch this history-making movement. And Henry, of course, was always the self-effacing person who wouldn't take credit for any of this. He was also the most generous man I've ever known. Generous with his time, and generous with his space. Leonard Lake, 3220, his house, everything he touched. We all have our Henry stories. When I first met Henry, John Steiner had asked me to go see him. I hadn't met him before. I was thinking of publishing a journal called Evolutionary Blues. Some of you may remember. I was about 2 sentences into describing the journal when Henry said, "Oh, this is the kind of computer you need." And I said, "Well, how much would it cost?" And he said, "Well, about $15,000. And I said, "Well, that's about how much money I make every year at that time." And Henry took out his checkbook and wrote out a check for $15,000. And I wrote back with a computer that almost didn't fit in my pickup truck. None of the organizations that I've been part of, Internews especially, and I think Kim and Evelyn would say the same about Link TV or Mosaic and all those things, really, we couldn't have made it to where we made it without Henry's support, his amazing generosity. I keep looking in the back because I really kind of expect Henry to show up. I expect to see him back there fidgeting with some gadget, while we're all up here. I mean, I think about Houdini, who, famously said that he would try to communicate from the other side, and as far as we know, never succeeded. But if anybody's going to succeed, it will be Henry, because for Henry, connectivity was libidinal, and he loved the paranormal. In fact, he loved the para-everything. He was as cute and loving as any teddy bear that he ever created. He was a geek before it was fashionable to be one. He made all of our worlds bigger. And today, our worlds are quite a bit smaller with Henry gone. Thank you, Henry. We love you.